My name is Angela Harders, and I am a certified PMA advisor that is committed to both seeking the truth and speaking the truth about PMAs and 508c1as. Alongside 4 of my other team members at the PMAmanifesto.com, we are working together in order to correct a lot of the misinformation that has been spread about PMAs and 508c1as. If you have not done so yet, please go back and watch the first video that I made on this topic called The Truth About PMAs. In this video, I will be sharing the truth about 508c1as. But before I do, I want to be clear that my intentions in doing this video are not to criticize or to be critical of any individual or any organization. I truly believe that there are a lot of very well-meaning, well-intentioned people that are trying their best to just simply pass on the information that they've heard from someone else, even if that information is not correct. So I'm not saying that these people are sharing misinformation with ill intentions or maliciously or intentionally trying to mislead people, but I do think that it is important that we can share truth with one another, and that is my purpose and intention in this video. One of the reasons why I think it is so important that I make this video is because in Ephesians 4:12 and 15, the Bible says it is our responsibility to equip God's people to do His work and to build up the church, the body of Christ. This will continue until we all come to such unity in our faith and knowledge of God's Son that we will be mature in the Lord, measuring up to the full and complete standard of Christ. Then we will no longer be immature like children. We won't be tossed and blown about by every wind of new teaching. And to be honest, I think that is exactly what has happened with regards to private membership associations and 508c1as. The verses continue, we will not be influenced when people try to trick us with lies so clever that they sound like the truth. Instead, we will speak the truth in love, growing in every way more and more like Christ, who is the head of His body, the church. The Bible also says in Ephesians 5:11, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. God has called us to do 2 very important things. First, we are called to speak the truth in love, and second, we are called to expose the lies. And that is what I will be doing in this video. When I was first learning about PMAs and 508c1as, one of the things that really captivated my attention was I kept hearing people say that by being a 508c1a, we would keep all of our rights. We would not have to voluntarily give up our freedom of speech or our freedom of religion when it comes to being involved with politics and legislation, the same way that a 501c3 organization has to do. And if you have been researching for any length of time about 508c1as, I'm sure that you've probably heard something similar. Perhaps you've heard messages just like these.
State filing and federal filing are not the same thing. They're 2 separate and distinct procedures, and the state filing does not waive speech rights that the federal filing does. So there's no waiving of the speech rights in the state filing. There is with the federal filing. God has important things to say about political issues affecting our lives and freedoms. We teach faith-based organizations there is another way, a better way to set up your ministry. Don't be a 501c3. Change your ministry status to a 508c1a. People are told the only way to set up their ministry is to be a 501c3. That is completely false. Why doesn't our church talk about politics? Not just candidates running for an election, but initiatives, referendums, even at the local levels. Why is the church silent on such important issues? If your faith-based organization is a 501c3, the problem is you waived rights to free speech and other rights guaranteed in the Constitution, because all 501c3 organizations are prohibited by federal law from speaking about and attempting or trying to influence politics. In addition to restricted speech, all 501c3 organizations are required to report annually to the IRS, comply with any rules and regulations that the IRS may from time to time prescribe, and provide testimony under oath if called upon. Scripture tells us, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." If you truly want to make a difference and build a lasting legacy in your community, the answer to prayer is to transform your 501c3 status to a 508c1a. All 508c1a organizations enjoy free speech, including speaking on political issues, and maintain the rights guaranteed in our Constitution. We will show you how to build a church that is free to speak about politics without restriction or compromise, remains tax exempt, accepts donations that are tax deductible, and is free from reporting requirements. That means it does not have to file a tax return.
That video was recorded and released by Helping Hand Outreach. Helping Hand is one of the most popular organizations that helps to set up 508c1a organizations. So here they're talking about if anyone can set up a 508. What is a faith-based organization? They define that as a faith-based organization is a corporation whose primary purpose or activities are religious or religiously motivated. Here they say, are there different types of 508c1as? And they say, yes, a 508c1a may be a church, an association of churches, or an integrated auxiliary of a church. If you saw my last video that I made, The Truth About PMAs, you'll realize that I also shared this as well. This is literally what 508c1a says in the tax code: churches, associations of churches, or integrated auxiliaries of a church. And they are correct. A 508c1a is not a PMA, it is not an SSM, and it is not a 508 trust. All right. So that is something that's really important. Now it says, what comes with 508 filing? Now this is very interesting because they say here the articles of organization, and you also get a certificate of incorporation, which means that by issuing you a certificate of incorporation, they are incorporating with the state. So that is another unique distinction. They are incorporated, which means you are incorporated under state laws. If you are incorporating in Washington state or in any other state for that matter, you can simply go to your state's website and they should have a sample articles of incorporation for a nonprofit or a religious entity. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at Washington's sample articles of incorporation, and this is their nonprofit corporation registration form. All right, so looking at this here, they have to have a business name. It can't have any of these things: incorporated company, cooperative, partnership, etc., all of that stuff. It has to be distinguishable. Charitable nonprofit corporation. These are the codes basically to determine if you are a charitable nonprofit corporation. The purpose of the corporation here, you have to indicate for which purpose the nonprofit is being organized. Any other provisions may be attached if needed. The purpose is really important because unless you are operating for a tax-exempt nonprofit purpose, and that is stated in your bylaws, you can't operate as a nonprofit. All right, and so those purposes come from the IRS website, and that is for religious, charitable, educational purposes. Again, all the things that I mentioned in my previous video, and we'll talk about this again a little bit later in this video, right? Any other provisions? It says, if necessary, provide language for IRS tax exempt status. See the IRS website for additional information. So if you want to be tax exempt, you have to include certain language in your articles of association or incorporation, all right? You have to have a registered agent. And this is what the form looks like. It is literally 1 to 3 pages long. All right, costs $80 to file. Very basic stuff. None of this is hard for a person to fill out, I think, on their own. This is the purpose of the corporation part. Again, this is where you have to add in that you're operating exclusively for religious purposes or exclusively for educational purposes or for charitable purposes. Any other provisions? Again, this is where you have to put in that tax exempt language. And that's all of the additional stuff, talking about that you're not going to be for someone's personal benefit. You are not going to try to influence legislation in any way, and all of those other IRS tax exempt language that must be included if you're going to be tax exempt. All right, here's where you fill out your registered agent info, and then you sign. And here you put your board of directors. and any other assets that you might have, and then your address so that they can, send to you whatever they need to. All right. So this is what the form looks like from Washington State. So while Helping Hand has Northwest Corporate Services for registered agents, there's also a Northwest Registered Agent, and they also help people to incorporate in all the 50 states, and they serve as the registered agent in all 50 states. Now, on their website, they have free religious corporation articles of incorporation. And if we look at their articles of incorporation, this is what it looks like. Again, another 3-page form. Nothing hard here. Pursuant to the section, this is where you're supposed to put the laws of whatever your state is. All right. So again, when we incorporate, we are creating a separate entity from ourselves, and that is under the state's authority. Here we have the name, existence, all of these things. And this is the section that I wanted to show you. So Article 11. Again, we see the comparison to the Washington State sample that they used, the Washington State form, and then we see similar language here as well. In Article 11, we see the purpose, and notice it says the purpose of the corporation is exclusively for charitable, religious, educational, and scientific purposes. All right, this is exactly the language taken directly from the IRS in Section 501c3, and this has to be in your articles if you are incorporating and you wish to be considered tax exempt or a nonprofit. All right, Article 12 here, prohibited activities. Again, all of this language here is all of the language from the IRS website, but I want to draw your attention to this part here. It says, no substantial part of the activities of the corporation shall be the carrying on of propaganda or otherwise attempting to influence legislation, and the corporation shall not participate in or intervene in any political campaign on behalf of or in opposition to any candidate for public office. So all of these places that tell you that a 508c1a is the only way that you can keep your freedom of speech and your freedom of religion, and they'll tell you, oh, a 501c3 gives up their freedom of speech and gives up their rights, but a 508c1a doesn't. Well, we can see right here, as long as you are incorporating with the state, you are giving this up. 508c1as still have to include this language if they want to be considered tax exempt, and I'll show you more on that later in this video. So keep watching. Here is another screenshot from Destiny 508, another organization that helps people supposedly set up 508c1a ministries by incorporating them through the state of Washington. Now, I know many of you may be thinking, well, that's the problem. They incorporated. When you incorporate with the state, you're putting yourself under the state's rules and regulations. Let's see.
So the first thing that I want you to remember is what we're talking about here is whether it is a faith-based organization, a private health association, a ministry, or a church.
Okay, pause. I just wanted to interject real quick to remind you that if you've not checked out my first video, The Truth About PMAs, make sure you watch that. But in there, I explain why a faith-based association, faith-based ministry, and even a faith-based private health association is not automatically tax exempt, and it is not a 508c1a. Okay, back to the video.
We are talking about unincorporated. This took me a long time to keep remembering is that, oh, right, the status that we are talking about is unincorporated. So that right there answers a lot of the questions. It immediately takes us into a different realm than the corporated ministries or churches or public entities.
There are many people out there, just like Dr. Lane, that are claiming that if you are unincorporated, then you're a free church and not a state church. But that is just not true.
Since the 508c1as are tax exempt, they're already tax exempt. As a right, they don't have to give up that right to religious exercise and free speech as the 501c3 sneaks in. They become a creature of the state. All organizations seeking tax exempt status must apply to the IRS except for the faith-based organization. FBOs, they can be formed under this section 508 C1A and enjoy the mandatory exemptions which are already inherent in their structure as a religious organization. So they become the creature of the state. They become a public entity, not a private entity as we are in the private membership association world or domain.
Want to understand the rights and the rules and the regulations that apply to a 508c1a, then we need to go back to the source. Let's take a look together. This is publication 1828, the Tax Guide for Churches and Religious Organizations. And we're going to scroll through this a little bit. Actually, let me zoom in so you all can see. All right, so when we're looking here at tax exempt status, if you are claiming to be tax exempt, it says churches and religious organizations, like many other charitable organizations, qualify for exemption from federal income tax under IRC Section 501c3 and are generally able to receive tax-deductible contributions. To qualify for the tax-exempt status, the organization must meet the following requirements. So whether you are a church or not, the way that the code is written, it literally forces all churches, whether they are 501c3 or 508c1a, to meet this requirement of Section 501c3 if they want to claim tax-exempt status. All right, and these are the 5 requirements. They have to be organized and operated exclusively for religious, educational, scientific, or other charitable purposes. That means they cannot operate business or engage in commerce and be considered tax exempt. The net earnings may not inure to the benefit of any private individual or shareholder. No substantial part of its activity may be attempting to influence legislation. The organization may not intervene in political campaigns, and the organization's purposes and activities may not be illegal or violate fundamental public policy. All right? And again, they are emphasizing that the automatic exemption for churches is for churches that meet the requirements of IRC Section 501c3. Churches that meet the requirements. What requirements? These requirements, these 5 requirements. If you do not meet these 5 requirements, you do not have an automatic exemption according to their codes. Which again, I believe this is a complete violation of our First Amendment rights, but it's important for you to know this. And to further emphasize this point, we're going to look at a court case. This is Taylor versus the Commissioner. All right, so here we see Taylor versus the Commissioner. And let me look here. Section 508c1a provides that churches, their integrated auxiliaries, and conventions or associations of churches are accepted from the general rule of Section 508a. Section 508a provides that organizations described in 501c3 and organized after October 9, 1969 are required to apply formally for recognition of their tax-exempt status. Thus, Section 508c1 simply relieves churches from applying for a favorable determination letter regarding their exempt status as required by Section 508a. Nothing in Section 508c1 relieves a church from having to meet the requirements of Section 501c3. In fact, it is clear that when the commissioner determines that an organization is not entitled to an exemption as a church, as is the case in this case here, its contributors must prove the church's right to an exemption under Section 501c3 in order to be entitled to a deduction for their contributions. And then they have other court cases here. Guys, this is huge. No one is telling you this. No one else is telling you this. Everyone is saying that if you're a 508c1a, you don't have to meet the requirements of 501c3, and yet right here in this court case, it explicitly says there's nothing in that section that relieves a church from having to meet the requirements of 501c3. Is this right? No. Is it constitutional? No. But nevertheless, it is here. It is here in the court cases, and it is also written in the codes, and you need to know the truth. Oh, and in case those of you may be saying that this only applies because they were incorporated under the state like they do with Helping Hands, no. It says here, the petitioner contends that his donations are tax deductible because they are not a corporation, but a church. So this is someone who did not incorporate under the state, and they were ruling against him, saying that the donations were not tax deductible because he is still obligated to meet the requirements of Section 501c3. A week ago, I attended a webinar with Destiny 508, and I asked them, do we have to abide by 501c3 requirements as a 508c1a regarding political involvement? And their reply was no. A 508 is different, but we can clearly see from this court case that the courts are not ruling like that. Now, I want to reiterate, I am not claiming that any of these individuals or organizations are intentionally lying to you, but what I am letting you know is that some of the information that these organizations and individuals are sharing is just not true. And there are many people out there that have PMAs or have 508c1as, and they think that they have protections that they really don't, or they think that they're able to operate in certain ways that they just can't. If you have a PMA or a 508c1a, I can bet you that 99% of them were improperly formed or are improperly operating. If you are not sure or you would like to know if your PMA or 508c1a is properly established, please reach out to me so we can book a consultation. I would love to do a document review for you, and I will be more than happy to go over the documents that you have and to be able to let you know if this organization, if your PMA or if your 508c1a is giving you the protections that you desire, and if it is meeting what you need to be able to operate your work or your worship the way that you intend. And in the words of my former friend,
keep researching.
No, but in all seriousness, if there is anything that I have learned over the last couple years, it is the importance of doing your own research. And over the last several months in particular, I have literally spent hundreds of hours reading and researching, reading the codes, reading the case studies. I have spent hours interviewing CPAs and attorneys, even IRS agents, people who've been operating PMAs, and more. I have gathered so much information alongside my team at the PMAmanifesto.com, and together we have compiled a 26-page document called the PMA Manifesto that contains all of the research that we have conducted. In that document, we will share 12 myths as well as 12 truths about PMAs and 508c1as. In addition to the PMA Manifesto, we're also offering a monthly membership where for just $20 a month, you will have access to live weekly sessions with all 5 of us. And we will be able to answer your questions and share with you the most up-to-date and accurate information about PMAs and 508c1as. I invite you to join our membership so that you can partner with us in walking in faith and freedom. Thank you so very much for watching this video. I invite you to share this video with your family and friends so that they can also learn the truth about 508c1as. And if you haven't done so yet, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can get the most up-to-date information about PMAs and 508c1as. I hope you have a wonderful day.